Hello and welcome to Stupid Ancient History with Midgley
and Taylor and our expert, non-expert and special guest James, Lord High Commander of the Science Cupboard. First of his name and knower of nothing. I've forgotten how long that is to say.
Can I have a new one for 2021?
No.
Oh.
As always, we're wearing togas and today we're going to look at the rule of Servius Tullius. Previously on Stupid Ancient History, we've been looking at the rise and reign of Tarquinius Priscus, the first of the Etruscan kings.
Or Tarquin kings.
Or later Roman kings.
Just party boy, I think. I like.
Yeah, fair enough. And how after a somewhat successful reign, he was murdered by assassins sent by the sons of Ancus Marcius.
You mean shepherds?
Yeah. Who else are you going to get TV killing for? Yeah.
Shepherds, obviously.
He was killed by sheep.
No. Shepherds. They didn't use sheep. But their plans wouldn't come to fruition as before his death, the next king had already been born in the royal palace and identified by a great omen.
Because his head set on fire.
Standard.
Normal, yes.
It's the fact they thought that was a good thing that worries me.
Yeah, but he put himself out, which was all good.
How did he do that?
Magic. So, following the murder of his adoptive father, with the support of Tanaquil, Tarquinius' wife, Servius Tullius becomes the next king of Rome.
This was after a bit of pretending that Tarquinius wasn't actually dead, even though he just had a rather large, significant axe wound to the head.
Yeah.
Which most people would probably finish you off.
Yeah, but other people's heads are on fire, so I don't think that's a problem. There's been a little bit of a pattern emerged so far. Like, this lad with a head on fire, he's going to be amazing or horrible, isn't he?
Why do you think that? Is it because of his fiery head?
Well, it's a bit of a clue. It's what first tipped me off.
Well, yeah, it is a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? The start of his reign as king doesn't exactly go smoothly, though.
Okay.
Obviously, being aware of current events, recent murders, he's quite worried about what the actual sons of Tarquinius Priscus will do in this situation.
He had proper sons?
Yeah.
Okay.
None of their heads set on fire, though, so they were in the running to being kings. Like, not you. One there.
Such a disappointment to your dad. Your head's not on fire.
Exactly. He's obviously also quite worried about getting a visit from the sheep herding assassins. I mean, everyone would be, wouldn't they? I wonder if whenever they saw like anyone with a sheep or whatever, they used to cower in fear.
They don't do something like mad, like just kill every shepherd, do they?
Not quite.
Yeah, so coming on to that, James, he comes up with something to try and fix the problem before it becomes a problem.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So what he does is he marries his daughters to the young princes.
Okay.
So he's got two daughters. Tarquinius had two sons.
Marry them both.
Marries them both.
Okay.
So his problems don't stop there, though, even though he thinks he's come up with this grand plan to sort everything out. Yeah.
Almost as soon as he's established as king, the Etruscans start to attack Rome.
Why?
Why not? This sort of thing seems to keep happening with different kings. One day you're friends, one day you're part of the Roman project. Next thing, you're invading.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, we don't really know why. We don't have a lot of detail about what happens in the war either, other than that Servius is able to win quite convincingly. Or as Livy puts it,
in that war, both the bravery and good fortune of Tullius were clear, and he returned to Rome after defeating a great army of the enemy, now unquestionably king.
Okay.
So he does well, and he comes back as this kind of victorious hero rather than like bloodthirsty monster with a bag of heads.
They're into winning battles, aren't they?
They are, as long as they win them right. But what happens in this war does prompt Servius to kind of review the state of Rome's army. It's a bit rusty. And he decides to do something about it.
Tanks?
Not quite, James, no. A bit early for tanks. But what he does do is he decides he's going to rapidly expand Rome's army. So he's going to make them bigger. Okay. Bigger and better.
Where are Rome's army at this point? Are they still a rabble of, like, former bandits
bad
and
man.
stuff?
No, they seem to have turned into some sort of army, but it's just not big enough. So
Right,
once
okay.
more.
Okay.
So rather than just forcing everyone into the army.
I was going to ask if they have conscription or anything like that.
No, he holds a census.
Okay. Very, very, very formal.
It is.
Yeah, so that's quite a dull thing to start.
I'm sorry.
All the best stories start with a census.
Well, yeah.
Arguably the greatest story ever told started with a census.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, stay with us.
Okay.
It's actually quite a clever idea.
Okay.
Livy describes it as...
I do enjoy making lists, so this may
Oh, you
appeal to
love
part
that.
of
There you
me.
go. So, Fari instituted the census, a most useful measure for an empire destined to become so great, according to which the services of war and peace were to be performed, not by every person as formerly, but in proportion to their amount of property. Then he formed, according to the census, the classes and centuries, and the arrangement as it now exists, well suited either to peace or war.
Okay. Still not that
You're
interesting.
still not that interested.
I mean, yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, what he's actually doing is making things a bit fairer, like a taxation system or how you enter the army. So rather than everyone contributing the same, people only contribute what they can.
Right, okay.
It's quite a nice thing, I think, that.
Yeah, and whilst there's only two main social classes in Rome at the time, you've got the patricians who are the fancy guys,
Yeah.
and the plebeians who are everyone else. Servius's census divides these two up into a further 6 groups.
Okay.
And they're measured in asses.
I love it.
Donkeys, obviously.
I guessed, but...
But that
yeah,
would be so good, wouldn't it?
So-
let's have a bum inspection and let's see.
So
Can we just interject here? We are in no way condoning a large-scale rectal examination.
Oh God!
Anyway,
so can you? I'm very glad I get to say this in context. Can you give me an example of an axe?
Right. Too easy.
They can't hear you point it in.
I'm pointing at Mr. Midgley.
what am I doing? Read the thing.
So, Livy says, of those who had an estate of 100,000 asses or more, he made 80 centuries, 40 of seniors and 40 of juniors. All these were called the first class. The seniors were to be in readiness to guard
First
the
ass.
city.
Stop.
The juniors to carry on war abroad. They were armed with a helmet, a round shield, greaves, a coat of mail, all of brass. These were for the defence of their body. Their weapons of offence were a spear and a sword.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, these are obviously the wealthiest chaps, the first class. You know, they get their own little carriage on trains, and it's all the fancy armour.
Cool. Okay. So what about the other ones? What the plebs get?
Wooden spoon, obviously.
Well, so it says the fifth class
Lower
increased,
asses.
was increased. 30 centuries were formed. These carried slings and stones for throwing, so not much better.
Oh my God!
Have a slingshot and shut up. Among them were the horn blowers and the trumpeters, distributed into 3 centuries. So they've got either a slingshot or a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Well, your brother played the trumpet for the
Yes,
army,
and
didn't he?
you don't. You
Yeah,
cannot
he fired a
imagine-
slingshot.
You cannot imagine how much grief I gave him when he used to tell people he was in the army, and I was like, "Yeah, he plays a saxophone. What's he going to do? Hit him with his saxophone
Oh, his slingshot.
or his slingshot?"
But they're not the bottom.
No,
There's
No,
loads.
there's more.
They just get literally nothing.
they just get the stones without the slingshot. So, from the rest of the citizens with property lower than this, a century was made up, which was exempted from serving in war. Because they had nothing, I
They had
assume, so there's
nothing.
no point
So
in them
what are
trying.
they, just like police during peacetime or
They're
something?
just there.
They're just knocking about.
Just like,
They're included.
yeah.
Maybe they actually show everyone their ass to find them off,
Oh.
and that's what they do.
Let's move on from that.
Okay. I'm going to guess this ends up being quite important because it sounds quite dull. So, yeah.
Therefore, it must be important.
Well, you only mention like the really banal things that are historically relevant or the horrible things because they're also historically
That's
relevant.
the only two things there are.
Yeah, exactly.
There is sometimes a mid ground.
Well,
no, not around here.
Right, okay.
there is more.
Okay.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
I didn't imagine it would just go well.
Well, it's going well. So in addition to these 5 classes, Servius also adds 12 centuries of cavalry from those people who can afford a horse.
Okay.
Yeah. So these become known as the equates or the equestrians, and they later become a separate branch of Roman government. So by the time you get kind of past the Republic and you get to the point of the emperors, they're a different social class. So they're ultimately like the traders and the merchants. So they're kind of like what we would say is the middle class.
Right,
That's what
okay.
the equestrians are in Rome. So you've got the patricians at the top, who are like the upper class. Then you've got the plebs, who are like the working class, and
Yeah.
the equestrians are kind of like the middle class.
Okay.
They do the jobs. If you're a senator, you're not allowed to have any dealings in business. Your main source of income has got to come from you just owning land.
Okay.
So the equestrians, it kind of morphs into this group of people, ultimately, that kind of own like manufacturing type things, or they might be traders or that kind of stuff, or they might be involved in other types of business. But they're normally quite wealthy, but their wealth is kind of made as opposed to it being passed
New
down.
money and old money.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
okay,
that,
okay.
it's that kind of distinction
And
between
horses.
the two.
Okay,
Yeah, and
so
horses.
was there social mobility? Like, if a pleb just did well, could they become an equestrian? Or
No,
Not
so
really, no.
you can't ever jump from the social groups, but what you do find is that equestrians can become part of the Senate, but they can never actually become part of the patrician class.
right? Okay.
So they're kind of people that get in there, but are always looked down on by people who are the original members of
Right,
the Senate
okay.
or the original patricians.
So that sounds as fair as what we've got now.
Some
It's
things
like,
haven't
it's
changed.
like the British class system.
Yeah. Sounds
in a
great.
nutshell.
So there's loads of new people knocking
Yeah.
about. Where did they all come from, and how big is Rome at this point?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. For the first time really ever, Livy gives us an idea of how big Rome is, and he says that under Servius's rule, Rome has about 80,000 citizens.
Do we
Yeah.
have any idea how that compares to
Big.
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 Yeah.
Yeah, well, they've certainly come a long way, haven't they, from that kind of ragtag band of runaways that Romulus gathered a few hundred years before that nobody else wanted and just brought them all together in one place.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've obviously henceforth and multiplied a lot.
Yeah.
So, with so many people in his kingdom, we see Servius's next development to Rome.
So the first thing that Servius does is he officially expands the city onto all of the 7 hills of Rome because they need the space.
Yeah,
Makes
Did they
sense.
know, how many did he have before that?
about 5.
Okay.
So you'll see on the screen Rome's got 7 hills.
Yeah.
You know, you've walked up and down them
I have done.
in sweaty hot heat. So yeah, they expand onto the next 2 hills. And around these hills he then builds what's called the Servian Wall, which is again on the map, which seems to be the earliest stone wall around Rome.
Okay. So it's not like one Remus can just hop over.
No, you can't jump over
They've
this
got
one.
a proper wall now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a problem though, isn't there?
There always is.
There's always a problem.
Yeah. The problem is we don't actually have any archaeological evidence for this wall from when he ruled in the 6th century.
Okay.
There's one for later on in the 4th century.
So where did it? So what, did it get knocked down? They built another one?
We don't know.
Yeah,
They
we're
just-
not sure.
People claim he built this wall. They like the idea he built
But it
this
was-
wall.
It was actually around 200 years
Yeah,
later.
we've not found his wall,
Right, okay.
but apparently he built a wall.
Right, okay. I just go around taking random credit for stuff.
Let's move on from that then.
So he's now got, what was it,
80,000 people.
80,000 people, 7 hills. He's lied about building a wall. Is he done?
Nope, there is more.
No, he was a busy chap though, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Done quite a
How
lot.
old is he at this point?
It's indetermined how old he is when he does these things. It's just
Right, okay.
in the rule of Servius.
Right, okay. Because there's a 200-year discrepancy about this wall getting
Yeah,
built,
but
so-
you know, what's 200 years between friends? So, he's quite forward-thinking as well as quite busy. Livy suggests that a lot of Servius's reforms are kind of essential in laying the groundwork for Rome's later organisation and growth into a huge empire. So he's kind of the turning point from ragtag band of
rabble into actual city.
Yeah, with organisation.
Right,
and
okay.
Stuff.
He sounds far too sensible for
Don't worry, we'll do our best to try and.
for someone who's famous because his head was on fire. He sounds far too sensible.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what you think. So, one of the main issues Servius has at this point is how to organise and manage all of these 80,000 people.
Yeah, so he sets up a census again.
God, he loves a good census.
To make sure that people contribute to the army, but for organisation, he introduced what is referred to as the tribal system.
Okay, what? So he's got asses and tribes.
He's got asses and tribes. He's got the ass tribe. He doesn't. He doesn't.
So what's a tribe?
Well, it's not what you're thinking of, probably. It's more based on the geography of Rome. So it's divided into different regions based on the hills and location.
Okay. So
Tribe seems relatively arbitrary.
you just live on that hill, you're in that tribe, you live on that hill. So were there settlements only on the hills? They didn't like any outlying
No, it's
areas?
the hills and surrounding areas.
Okay.
So, I mean, this division is used to kind of manage the people within the city for things like taxation, voting. It's a bit like setting up different councils within the city. You know, they all get the bins collected on different days.
Okay. So before that, was it just we all just live in one big community?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right, okay.
But it wasn't that big, so it wasn't an issue.
Fair enough.
The bigger you get, the more you
I don't think you answered. Where did all these spare people come from?
Around.
Migration.
So you said these tribes were like set up for voting. What do you vote for if you got a king?
Well,
Livy's not particularly clear, is he, about what people are voting on? But it's quite detailed about how the voting is organised.
Right, okay.
That's the interesting bit, isn't it?
Well, you say interesting. The last few times I've had a vote is one of those interregnums, and it was the dullest thing that's ever happened.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of the organisation of whatever they're voting for, Servius once again uses his census to sort it all out.
God,
Census King.
Is this what he's famous for?
Census. Yeah. So, although he honours the idea that Romulus put forward that all Romans had equal rights to vote, because of the increasing size and diversity of Rome, he has to modify this slightly.
How do you when modified, do you mean like taking the vote away from people?
Dodgy, doesn't it?
I mean, Livy tells us that everyone has the right to vote.
Okay.
But it's the order in which people vote and likely the influence of their vote that comes into that Servius adapts, and this is largely worked around their wealth.
Right. Okay.
So the wealthiest patricians, or the first-class citizens, were the first to vote. Then the second, third, and so on.
Right. Okay.
So.
And the people with nothing voted last.
Yeah. It's not truly democratic, is it?
Yeah.
But they've got a king, so
yeah. So I mean, it's an irrelevancy.
So when you say get to vote first, is that just like, does that just carry more weight, or do they?
we get the idea that if you vote first, your vote's a bit more important.
Right. Okay.
And if you vote in last, it's almost pointless because everyone else has voted. But again, we're not clear on what voting rights those who couldn't contribute to the army are given. You know, those right at the bottom.
The ones that don't even get the slingshots.
Yeah, they get nothing. No votes for the poor.
You don't get a slingshot, you don't get stones, you don't get a vote.
Yeah, you just get to be there. But what this ultimately leads to is that kind of power, more than ever, seems to be firmly within this ruling patrician class. You know, they've got the best armour, they're the best bit of the army, they get to vote first, or as Livy puts it,
all these burdens were taken off the poor and laid on the rich. I mean, it's only a burden, isn't it?
Oh no, the burden of being in charge.
Yeah. Then an additional honour was conferred upon them, for the right to vote was equal for all as it had been established by Romulus, and yet the whole power might reside in the chief men of the state.
Right.
Rich people got power, poor people got nothing.
Sounds all too
But they
familiar.
have the illusion of power. And that's more important than anything.
God.
I look forward to having a lunch of an illusion of a sandwich rather than a sandwich.
This guy was started off sounding fairly sensible and balanced, and now he's just taken the vote away from most of Rome.
You're not a fan of that?
Not really. No. Andy's big fiery head. Forgot about that.
I was going to say, was it just that he thought it'd be nice to have around in these cold winter months? Keep you warm.
Do they even get cold winter months in Italy?
Not by our standards.
So he's not sounding great at this point. He's sounding like a bit of a despot.
Yeah.
Does this carry on?
Well, no. He does start to do. He does do good things with this census.
Yeah, so...
Did he invent the census?
I've never expected you'd laugh at the word census.
I don't normally hear it like 8 times in 20 minutes.
Well, you just
I'm
not
literally
cool.
just going to walk behind you on the corridor and just start going, census! And then running away.
Chuckle my way all the way around school.
So one big benefit of the census is that it builds in a system for dealing with plebeian poverty. So you just care about the poor people.
Is this part of the burden that is
It's
Yeah.
the
based on the
burden of
patrician?
power and control.
Right, okay.
Which is only ever said by the people in power and control.
With money.
Yes. So they are no longer expected to contribute financially to the military, which is good because they probably haven't got anything anyway. On the same level as the rich, which is obviously much fairer.
Okay, so the equestrians are still expected to contribute.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also a suggestion in the sources that there's sort of financial support for those who are at the very, very bottom. So it's almost like an early sort of welfare system.
Yeah.
So with all the tax they're collecting, there's some left over. So, even though you may not have the same voting rights, you are less likely to starve to death.
Guess it swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the other nice thing he does is he builds a temple of Diana in Rome and formally acknowledges her position within the Roman pantheon of gods.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is quite a big step, especially for those Romans who are now kind of descendants of the Albans, who Tullus forced into Rome. So Diana was their patron god.
Right, okay.
So it makes them feel like they're being represented and being welcomed. He was pretty much officially abandoned, or had been officially abandoned up until this point.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it makes
when
them
he
feel
burns Alba Longa after Theseus' shenanigans. They don't burn the Temple of Diana, but it's just left there to go to rack and ruin.
Around a ruined city.
Yeah, so the kind of Diana's sort of shunned, but then Servius goes, there's a lot of these people here who are still sort of Alban. Better build them a temple.
So do they worship a full pantheon here? Or are there like certain ones they... Because obviously Mars is big.
Mars is big. Jupiter's big. Janus, yeah. It's not... They don't have a list of who they worship, but we pretty much guess that it's fairly established by the time of this. And yeah, Diana kind of rounds off the pack.
Okay.
But potentially Servius's biggest reform, however, only starts to slip through as a little bit of a suggestion. He never actually gets to follow through with it.
What, like an illusion of something good?
Yeah.
Like wolf prostitutes.
And not wolf prostitutes.
Oh, you got it in!
I've not mentioned there was a stretch.
You got it
not
in.
mentioned it this time.
No, it's not wolf prostitutes.
Oh.
Sorry. So yeah, there's a suggestion in Livy that Servius actually intends to end the rule by king.
Oh, okay.
So Livy states, yet mild and moderate though his sway was, some writers state that he had intended to resign it as being a government by one man.
So what he's suggesting here is that the ultimate reform Servius is planning is to end the monarchy and presumably move to some kind of Republican government.
I was
Hence why they're worrying about voting and things like that.
It makes sense, doesn't it? If he's put so much effort into setting up voting rights, power sharing, it's kind of laid that foundation.
Yeah, and we also get this sense that kind of Rome at this point, it's simply too big for one man to rule.
So yeah, monarchy and rule by an individual is portrayed as working quite well in a smaller settlement. For example, under kind of Romulus, Numa, Tullus, and indeed in these kind of early states of settlement where you need one kind of strong single voice to actually lead everyone.
Yeah, but by the time Servius is in power, it's like a more representative government is needed for a much bigger population. We've also got a little hint of the idea that the kingship's getting a bit corrupt in the way Tarquinius Priscus comes to power, and he appoints Servius rather than having an interregnum.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is like you say, gearing up towards a republic.
Yeah.
What about something else that had kings, like feudalism? Was that around by this point?
No.
That come after?
Not for another 1,000 years.
So they invented democracy before feudalism?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then went back.
That's not the way around I thought that went.
So we should point out, though, as well, that it's very kind of uncertain, and it could be just something that Livy's put in there because of his own kind of fondness for the Republican style of government. So he's kind of saying, oh, look, it's been there all along.
It was always a good idea. This cool guy who likes censuses thought about it.
But this is still being written under
Augustus.
So would he not want to almost delegitimize a republic?
Well, no, because Augustus claims he's rebuilding the republic.
Right, okay.
But with him on top.
Yeah.
So then to look at Servius in summary, I mean, in comparison to previous kings, he is quite clearly different to Tarquinius Priscus. He's different to all the early kind of mythical kings. He's a reformer, ultimately. His big thing is fixing the tax and legal systems and organisation of Rome with a census.
The biggest kind of similarity, although he's very different in some aspects, is probably Romulus, isn't it? Because Romulus establishes a lot of things out at the very beginning, and then he's kind of building on what's already been established, whereas a lot of the other kings, they don't really change anything that much. Numa changes religion, but not like the processes of rule.
It's almost like enough time has passed from Romulus that by the time of Servius, Romulus's original ideas, they need some some tweaking, some judging up.
Do we know if he had like opposition to this? Were people up for it, or? I mean, he's given all the most powerful people.
They were clearly happy with it.
Yeah, he's given the most powerful people power, so I'm assuming none of them complained.
Yeah, I mean, he seems clearly that Livy thinks we should have high praise for this guy. He's portrayed as very popular when he comes to power, even though he's done it through not necessarily the greatest means. People accept, he's the right guy for the job.
Okay.
He ticks all the boxes. He's good at war. Tick. He's dutiful to the gods. Tick. Rome grows and becomes more successful and people are better off. Tick. So he's clearly someone who stands out as one of the better kings.
He's also
good
in the central heating emergency as well.
Good in cold weather. I mean, again, if we're looking at Livy, we can see there are some obvious comparisons between Servius and Augustus. This idea of moving power, restructuring, keeping the plebs on side whilst kind of pacifying the aristocracy.
Well, Augustus does quite a lot, doesn't he, for the equestrian class as well? So that's another thing. Augustus this class lets more of them go into the Senate and things like that. So that's another link that you could...
Okay, but that class system persists all the way up to Augustus?
Yeah.
It carries on beyond Augustus.
There's that exact structure?
Pretty much, yeah. So he's kind of like pre-Augustus.
Right, okay.
Yeah, he doesn't change.
Don't think Augustus's head's on fire, though.
No. Well, it's something that as you go through later, it sometimes causes quite a lot of... It can cause tension, especially between the equestrians and the senators, and kind of where an emperor kind of puts their loyalty and who they support more. That can cause kind of ruptions within like imperial Rome.
But not for Servius. His head's too fiery for that. And if they started kicking off, he'd soon fix it with the census.
God.
So there you have it, a little introduction to the rule of Servius Tullius. Thank you for listening. We hope this has been useful. Leave us a comment below or just the word census. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.